Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Global Head Oracle Cloud Services, WIPRO Limited, Ashish Banka.
Good afternoon, folks. So we've got 45 minutes, and what we are going to discuss today is about cloud, your cloud journey. Is it migration? Is it transformation? And what's the difference? Does it really matter? Very quickly, what we are going to do is we'll touch upon the differences. We'll talk about based on what we have seen. Leave a few key ideas behind with you for you to think about, see how you want to weave it in with your journey. And then my colleague, Mr. Gopal Krishna, will come out on stage. He'll talk through what does it then mean to transform with the cloud, and how does that journey shape itself up. And that's an important piece, because while I can talk about the ideas, the proof is in the pudding. And then we'll take a few questions. And after that, there is a raffle draw. So 3 lucky winners get $500 vouchers. So we'll do that last few minutes. All right. So with that, I'll get started. So key question that we're going to talk about is migrate or transform. What does it really mean? And between DriveStream WIPRO, we've taken about 240 customers onto cloud. So we've learned a few things. I'll talk about that. But before I do that, I do want to get a sense of people in the room. What does it mean for you? What is your real objective for considering Oracle Cloud or embarking on that journey? So I'll just do a little bit of a show of hands. So how many here, for you, it is migrating your applications and technology onto Oracle Cloud as opposed to transformation? Just a little bit of a show of hands. Is it migration for you? OK, interesting, very interesting. I see a few hands going up. Let me flip that question now. So we all have different notions what transformation means, but just assuming transformation for whatever it is worth, show of hands, what is your primary objective? Is it transformation? If it is transformation, show of hands, please. I want to see, is it really what's driving you? OK, so that's interesting. I see about 25% hands go up with the transformation, but very few with the migration. Now, dial back 2 years, and we would see almost everyone talking about migration. So what has really changed in these intervening times? It's really, really very simple. What started as a promise of cloud was TCO, efficiency, scale. And that's really worked out. But then, increasingly, everybody is looking for value. Now, what does that mean beyond migration, therefore? So it's about digital for us. And digital, we'll talk about what that means. But it's a term we are all hearing about. It's essentially how do you connect with your customers in various different ways, and how does it translate from an enterprise perspective? Because here, for a lot of us, it's really the enterprise, what we also call back office, mid office. Our third key point that we're going to talk about is how do you then leverage the cloud to innovate, to differentiate. So you've heard about these terms. We'll talk about what it means from our learning so far. But it's easier said than done, right? So, you've heard this, and you're also grappling with these decisions internally. And why? Because the choices have grown. If I look at just the last 2 years, the way the product has evolved, the number of choices just within the Oracle umbrella, the breadth and the depth, it's really grown significantly. So now your permutation combinations have grown tremendously. And it's even more complicated by the fact now old decision models, frankly, don't work as well. I mean, we see all the time customers looking at an RFP process or a product selection process, defined requirements, and still at the end of it, they are not sure about their decision. So what does it mean then to decide? Do you look at your requirements? But that's like, in our view, looking in the rear view mirror and trying to look into your future. So where do you go from there? We believe it's about looking into the future from a critical capabilities perspective. It's no longer about frozen requirements, no. It's more about adapting, and therefore it's more important to define what your critical capabilities are as opposed to what you can look back in the mirror. So I spoke about these 3 points, and then I spoke about critical capabilities. So how do you then sort of connect the dots between these critical capabilities, and then what do you do next? So here we are going to leave you with 3 ideas. We'll dive into each of the 3 ideas very quickly. So simplification that I mentioned, which was really the original promise of the cloud, which still persists, but its manifestation has evolved. What we see as simplification is no longer simply about migrating to the cloud. It's about one enterprise, a connected enterprise. I'll talk about it in a few minutes. Next is digital. What does that really mean in an enterprise? It means digital one office. I'll talk about that as well. And these are points I really do want to get into the details. So we'll talk about the point, and then we'll take an example for customers who's actually done it successfully. And the most important point, and it's an emerging point for customers, is how do you leverage cloud for innovation and differentiation? And that's where extending the edge becomes important. We'll talk about it as well. So if you look at it, these are the 3 points which we believe would be what we want to leave you with. So diving into the first one, if you look at simplification, right? So today, when we look at enterprises, the customers that we meet on a regular basis in all walks of life, right? Across commercial enterprises, not for profit, you look at large enterprises, mid-sized enterprises. A common theme is most organizations put enterprise processes by functions. So financials is fairly independent of HR, is fairly independent of supply chain, and so on and so forth. That really works well from an efficiency perspective, cost takeout perspective, right? Running our departments and so on. What does it do, though? So there's a little bit of a story actually to it, and I kind of read this book several years back by Alfred P. Sloan. We know about the Sloan School of Management, but the gentleman was the CEO of GM. Now, how General Motors grew was by acquiring a lot of brands, but then they created these departments, these functions. It worked beautifully. But as we see it, it's an inside-out view. We are running an efficient internal organization. It's creating silos, is how we see. So what it does, even with modernizing with the cloud, we are going from a legacy spaghetti to a modern spaghetti. We also call it best of breed. I call it spaghetti, just us. How about we flip it? If I take the example of a commercial enterprise, they have a very simple goal, profitable growth. They are either driving profit or growth or both. If that is a simple objective, then why are we looking at internal efficiencies? Each and every function is driving towards that one single goal. And that's the virtuous cycle that WIPRO talks about. Therefore, it is even more important that you look at use cases that are not just financials, not just supply chain, not just HR. Most of the times, the question that I ask my customers are use cases that cut across. When you start looking like that, you start actually simplifying. Because now you're looking at the whole enterprise as one organic whole. If I have to put one point across, it is this. We'll take the example of a utility and a diversified one in North America. Now, about 2.5 years back, they actually looked far ahead into the future. They spoke about an idea of a digital utility. They spoke of an idea of an adaptive enterprise. So we took a step back. Now, there are some numbers here for you to kind of get a gauge of their size and their breadth and the complexity. But the important points are really the fact that such a complex enterprise with so many legal entities, 48, were driven through some 8 to 12 operating companies, which means different procedures. Supply chain is separate, financials are separate, you don't have a single general ledger. Everything is, a lot of it is manual. They're managing a lot of their assets through a spreadsheet. However, they had this vision. So we worked together. We first moved them to a shared services model. So here, if you think about it, we are not even talking technology. We are not even talking a product. We are talking about change. How do you do your business? Goes back to my point. First look at the enterprise as a whole. Once they embraced the shared services model for the sourcing, next came, how do you then get a common GL view? Once you bring all your different entities, more importantly, operating companies, to a common view, then change starts manifesting itself. Transformation actually you can see. This is really what happened. And as you will notice, we are talking about the whole span. There is supply chain, there is projects, you're talking about procurement, HR, everything. The good news is they went live, they are happy, and the change adoption has been pretty good. They are also self-sufficient in managing the new platform. So this is an example where customer was not looking at purely an entity called financials, an entity called supply chain, an entity called HR. They got together and they worked in tandem to come up with a one adaptive enterprise. So the next point I want to bring, so I spoke about the first point, which is one enterprise, one connected experience enterprise. Second point we want to talk about is how we even look at back office or mid office or front office. I mean, that's the traditional definition, right? So this is how we see the conversation happening all over. But back to the point, if this is one enterprise and it is servicing unique stakeholders, but for a common mantra, let's say for the commercial enterprise, if it is profitable growth, then no, everything is front office. It is all about experience, and experience delivered to the internal user and external user. In our minds, there is no concept, therefore, of a front office, mid office, back office. No. We break that barrier. The moment you break that barrier, you start looking at your enterprise very differently. Now, I'll take a very simple example, and I'm going to reinforce that later. How many times do we look at our HR and within HR recruiting as a way our brand is in the market? Now, in the talent market space, the recruiter is your face to that candidate. Are we putting our best people in recruiting, or are we putting people who may not be as skilled to handle that? That's our brand out there. So the way we look at it, we are breaking the boundaries, and therefore, we are looking at it in a very outside-in perspective. We are looking at it with a very fresh perspective. I'll take an example. Example is of a leading publishing firm, a media and publishing firm in Americas. Now, the interesting part about this firm is it's also a large enterprise. So we are only talking about large, complex enterprise examples. We are not talking about small examples because they are easy ones. We are really talking about millions of orders here. We looked at the whole quote-to-cash process with them, but with end-user experience in place. Now, suddenly, your CRM and your supply chain start talking with each other. Are they delivering the same user experience internally and externally to your end buyer? And then suddenly, the approach changes completely. And what we started was actually the way we started had very little to do with technology. We started with pure experience research. Now, this is all leveraging Oracle Cloud, by the way. However, when we are starting with experience research, we are talking to the end buyer, doing interviews, doing discussions, figuring out user journeys. We are creating persona models, figuring out this is the persona, this is Gen Z, this is Gen Y. What are their aspirations? How are they consuming? Are they more comfortable with a mobile device? Are they comfortable with something else through social media? That's how we looked at it. And that drove insights for even the customer. Because you know what? For requirements, like I said earlier, you can't look in the rearview mirror. So we were not necessarily relying on internal users for defining requirements. The customer also was very open about it. So together we went and spoke with their end users. It drove a lot of insights for everyone. That set of insights translated into these user journey maps, but more importantly, what are the critical capabilities for the future? I'll talk about the third insight. Now, this is going to the point I spoke about, how do you digitize on the edge? So far, we spoke about point number one, breaking the silos between functions, and therefore looking at the connected enterprise as a whole. Second insight we spoke about is, how do you then leverage digital and no longer look at these as back office functions, but together as your digital one office. Digital, if I have to put in very simple terms, not scientifically, is really about touching the customer's experience, whether internal or external. So digital one office is the second concept. Now we are going to extend that. How do you then leverage your ecosystem? How do you leverage the edge technologies that are coming into play? So here are a few examples on top of the visual that we've been working with so far. So if you look at it, right, you now have the power of embedded analytics you can leverage. You've got IoT. There are so many use cases being discussed. You can talk about predictive analytics. You can talk about real-time manufacturing. You can talk about PaaS for SaaS. PaaS is no longer about customization. It's about innovation. So if you start looking at this, now beyond the ERP cloud, when I refer to ERP, I'm referring to financial, supply chain, HR, the whole enterprise in general, not the strict definition of ERP. But you have to go further out. Because if you are looking at edge, then that's happening really here. I'll take another example. And this is a customer who's really on the cutting edge. They are a manufacturing firm out of Middle East. And what they have done is they've already completed their journey onto Oracle Cloud with, again, supply chain, financials, HR, CX, the whole 9 yards. They've gone live last year, and they're continuing to push forward. Now what they are doing, they are getting into IoT. Within that, they are looking at predictive maintenance. They are looking at real-time supply chain intelligence. So if you look at it, here is an organization that is reinventing itself, but also leapfrogging ahead of a lot of manufacturers. We see a very few customers who are doing this today. But we are seeing a customer who is therefore leveraging this, not just for efficiencies, not just for migrating technology, but to create a competitive edge. And hence the point about transformation. So at this point, I want to then dive into what does this journey look like. We've talked about 3 messages. We've talked about 3 customers. 2 of these customers are here as well. We'll now talk about what does it mean to undertake this journey. So to do that, I'm going to invite my esteemed colleague, Gopal Krishna. He's the president and CEO of DriveStream Inc. DriveStream and WIPRO entered a strategic partnership 4.5 years back, summer of 2014. And WIPRO has taken a stake in that company, so it's a partnership beyond a strategic partnership. It's an invested partnership for us. And it's really important to hear what DriveStream has learned in the market, and therefore what those insights mean in terms of implementing some of these ideas into reality. So I welcome Gopal Krishna, CEO and President of DriveStream Inc.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashish. Good morning, folks. Thank you, Ashish. Thanks for attending our session this afternoon. My name is Gopal Krishna. I started DriveStream 17, 18 years ago. It seems like a lifetime now, out of my basement. And if you're all wondering, what does that have to do with what we're going to talk about now? It's because I've been there, done that, and I have a lot of battle scars in my body to share some knowledge and experience from what we've learned from all these years of doing different projects, different implementations. So what you're going to hear today is about a simplified version of what we have learned. Every week I get a report from my delivery organization about every project that happens in DriveStream. And I'm always interested to understand what is going wrong, what could be done better to make sure that we are able to deliver, avoid mistakes, and deliver better the next time we do this. So over time, we were one of the early investors in the cloud ecosystem. We've done more than 200 plus cloud implementations till date. And what it has taught us is that we've every lesson learned, we've tried to group it into categories and realize what is it that we have to do for the transformation journey to be more seamless for our customers. So I want to share with you some of the most simplistic things that we've learned over the next few minutes, so we can get some questions around it. So as you know, life has changed a lot in the last 20 years. A lot of organizations are sitting on technology and ERP implementations and applications that have been implemented and used for the last 20 plus years. Lot has changed. Your business has changed, your customers have changed, your people have changed. I know a lot of people have kids here in the audience, and I do too. And if you can't yell from the kitchen and ask your children to come down and they don't listen to you, the only way to get them down from upstairs to down to have dinner with you is to text them on their cell phones and say, honey, come down, dinner's ready. That's the only way they'll respond to you. You know that life has changed. And that's your future customer, that's your future employee. So a lot has changed, processes have changed, technology has changed. Over time, what's happened is customers have put together a lot of different hodgepodge solutions over time to address some of these new technologies, new options and requirements in the industry. And they wake up one fine morning realizing that now they have a whole bunch of processes working, not working seamlessly together. So old technology or disparate systems alone are really not reason for the current state issues. That's something that we realize in every client we go to. We realize that there are significant amount of processes and that are broken and data that is sitting all over the place. So just taking all of this stuff and trying to force fit it into newer technology is going to create, the same in a new technology. That's pretty much it. It's the spaghetti thing that Ashish was talking about. That's what we realized in most of the customers that we go to. So transformational implementations versus migrations. The three major categories: technology, people, and process. Very simple stuff. You've decided to replace your technology because of many reasons: disparate systems, obsolete systems, platform inefficiency, whatnot. And then you have data and processes that are broken, so you got to fix that. But even if you go down a journey to do both these things, changing your technology, changing your processes, normalizing your data, all of that stuff as part of your project, what we have realized is that unless your people are bought into what you're doing, it's not going to be successful. So I could split our projects in the cloud transformation in the last 4.5 years exactly into 50-50. Customers who focused on change, customers who focused on technology. The customers who focused on change and transformation have been much more successful and gotten much more return out of their cloud investments than the customers who have just moved technologies and put all their old processes and data into the new systems. So key here is what I call enthusiastic adoption. How do you bring about enthusiastic adoption from your people? For that, I think 3 simple things that we have realized over the period of time. One, building momentum early on in the process. It's not about just top down selling, this is what I'm going to do, but your people down from bottom up, even the lowest person in the talent pool should be bought into what's happening. Second, guided execution. Giving them time during implementation process to focus on change and focus on the processes that are changing in their lives is a very, very crucial requirement for enthusiastic adoption. And I've got some points about that I want to talk about. And third is painless transition. Everybody is going live. They're in a new system. They're all excited. They've met their milestones. But what we've realized is the first 6-8 months after go live is the most crucial period for them to adopt and accept the system. And a lot of times that's the most ignored period. That's when the pain really hits the highest levels, and then they are, struggling to recover. Enthusiastic adoption, pre-implementation. What's in it for the users? That's a key question that they need to understand. They have to understand the big picture, why this is being done. Third, gaining consensus on the initiative, that multiple stakeholders, they all need to understand and acknowledge that this is the right thing to do. And finally, collaboratively building a roadmap and plan. When it becomes their plan and their roadmap, they're a lot more prone to accept it and live with it. This has to happen before implementation. Guided execution. I was telling you about what people do during an implementation, and how it has to be seamless. If they are spending a lot of time on mundane tactical tasks that they don't get enough time to understand what's changing around them, it's not going to go that well. So providing best practice knowledge, step-by-step guidance, strategy and tools for effective communication training, and tools to reduce workload and avoid mistakes are ultra important during this phase of the project for enthusiastic adoption. And then finally, painless transition, which I was telling you again, day-to-day activities, they're not going to be able to get it the first time around, needs some help during that process. Then there's milestone activities, open enrollment, month-end close, year-end close, performance and cycles, whatever. They need to have proper planning and proper process in place to be able to handle that in the system, because a lot of things change differently from the day-to-day activities. And if that's not there, then they're going to struggle. And then continuous improvements from updates and stuff that has to show them that it's going to get better. So enthusiastic adoption happens when you're engaging them from top to bottom, not by just sending them pretty pamphlets and communication stories about what we're doing. And that continuous engagement makes them much more successful and in adopting the new technology and the new process. Finally, I've talked about engaging with the business, but you also have to create an environment by focusing on the right things, by avoiding mistakes that would allow them to really focus on their business and the change around the business. Number one, so the 5 critical areas. Number one, global design. Making sure that global design is done right is very, very crucial. We have had such failures in our customers where global design wasn't paid attention to in the beginning, and had to go back to revisit everything to recover from that implementation. Number 2, process. Having a more robust discussion around process that Ashish was talking about, and having a more holistic view of the process is ultra important. Number 3, governance. It's a very complex implementation with a lot of different parties involved. Having right tools and processes to handle governance is an ultra important part of the journey. Number 4 is data. How your data is coming, where it is coming from, and how to put it into the new technology is a major initiative. And number 5, of course, is change management and communication. One example I can give you, I asked my team to put together data from all of our 240 plus implementations. Where do we spend the maximum time? Give me one task that we spend the maximum time on. And we found out that data and handling data in a migration was the most time-consuming and the complex portion of the implementation. So it was almost 40% of the project time was spent on data, extraction, transformation, and loading the data into the new system. Now, what could you do to alleviate some of the concerns or some of the challenges and the time that they put in? Business users participating in a project could spend 6 months of the time doing data cleansing and all of that stuff, or they could have the right tools to be able to do that in a month, and the 5 months that they have saved from that could be going into more process discussions and how the business changes and stuff. That's the difference. So you have to, coming back to one full cycle from where I started, number one, transformational implementations are a must if you want to get the best returns from your technology investments right now. You could take a blueprint of your house from 20 years ago and build a new house. You might get better plumbing, better electricity because you're putting new wires and new plumbing in there, but your inefficiencies of the house, the model, the floor plan, everything's not going to change. You're going to still have the same pain. Number two, you got to engage your users through the life cycle, and there are ways that you should think about how to get them to be enthusiastically adopting this. That's the key focus area that we've realized, that every customer that has put effort into that has been successful. Every customer who's not done that, irrespective of how well the technology investments have gone, how well the projects have gone, how good the implementation has gone, ultimately end up not getting the best results. And number three, create an environment of where you're focusing on the right things and having the right set of advice and tools to be able to reduce workload on mundane tasks like this, and putting your effort into a lot more value-added tasks like changing your business and changing your processes. So if this together, all these 3 points that I was talking about, is the single most thing that we realize that when we engage in a transformational implementation, we make sure that this is what we have to think about, and make sure that we have to guide the customer through the whole process to be able to produce results. Okay, with that, I want to get Ashish back here and open up the open up the session for question and answers. Ashish.
Thank you, Gopal. All right, folks, so we will take questions. There are a couple of folks here with microphones, so just please raise your hand or just stand up and we'll take the questions. Actually, it's hard to see the hand, so maybe just stand up.
So can you give some examples of more companies, specifically on the financial side, where you have done end-to-end transformation? Like, just talk about them a little, and then maybe cover like where they were before in terms of the ERP solution or analytics solution to where did they migrate? Like, were they from Oracle in-prem to cloud, or was it a different ERP to cloud?
Sure. So I'll take an example, and then Gopal, I'll invite you for another example. So I'll take the example of a firm where they were on EBS, a combination of EBS and some homegrown technologies. And before they migrated, they realized that it's no longer about migration, because one of the key questions we discussed with them was, let's relook at your enterprise structures, starting with chart of accounts. So then the conversation began with chart of account design. Is it set for the future? Now, at that point, we spent time deciding where are they headed as a business, what is their strategy, depending on their products, product mix, geographical mix, and the target customer mix, so that they drive the right insights through that redefinition of the whole enterprise structures. So therefore, in this particular example, you will see that it wasn't merely an implementation or modern best practices alone, but starting with the first principles of the target operating model itself. And to your question, and that's how we first defined, so that later on when they drive business intelligence, it's meaningful. Gopal.
I think that's the same story, right? So they were going from EBS on-prem to EBS on-prem,
yeah.
Right? To a full suite of Oracle Cloud solutions, complete ERP that includes financials, HR, payroll, and supply chain modules as well. And now they're working on phase 2 activities and rolling it out to other countries like Mexico and whatnot.
And we are seeing that across various industries. I want to say manufacturing, high tech, to some degree in communications, a lot in media. We see very good uptake in retail, and this we are seeing across geographies. And like I was mentioning earlier, up till about a year back, it was focused more on embracing the cloud as a ERP, but now it's starting with target operating model first.
See that what Mr. Gopal has said, that 5 attributes, that global design, process, governance, change management, and all. It is, we have seen that in any ERP implementation, we saw these other 5 attributes. But what is the difference in cloud journey? Can you highlight on that?
Absolutely. So every one of them, right? So in the past, if you were handling data in on-prem world, you had access to the source system and you had complete access to the target system as well. So your extraction, transformation, loading, you're understanding what errors that it is throwing out. How the data structures look in the on-prem systems that you're loading data into. You had all the control with you. In the cloud world, there is a window and a way to be able to load data into the window. It's very sophisticated. Oracle spent a lot of time and effort putting together a very robust, when we first started loading data into the cloud, say 4 years ago, we would load data and it'd come up with errors, and then we fix the errors, then we load the next row, and it comes with the next set of errors because there was a massive list of checks and balances that they had put in to make sure that you don't put junk data into the system. But because it's a cloud and because you're going through a small window and that's the only format that you can load into the cloud, now you're kind of looking at how do I get all these errors in one place? How do I look for all these errors in one place? So the difference is that you got to understand all the 450 plus validations, by trial and error, understand how to check for all of them, and how to create meaningful error reports upfront so that the customers can get that fixed and put it back into the cloud in the format that you have, the window that you have to put it into the cloud. That's one example of how it's different in the cloud. It's not the same for on-prem. It's a lot more restricted in the cloud world. That's one example, and I can give you multiple in every area. For processes, for example, your processes are, going from you have a unique opportunity to take a whole bunch of processes in different systems, to take it to one system, and then probably add, past solutions on top of it. What Ashish was talking about, add, RPA, robotic process automation solutions on top of it. So just looking at the entire transformation from this to this as just I'm going to take this one business process and put it here, show me how this business process works here, is one way. But in the cloud, with all the supporting technologies and opportunities that you have, you could make it a lot more efficient, business process mapping from old systems to the new system. Similarly, change management, it's a huge undertaking. The modern HR, modern finance that Oracle's claiming changes how we look at the systems and how it works. It's changed a lot in terms of the user interface and how users interact with the system, and how much of it is outsourced as BPO was insourced, and what is done now, how much can you bring back internally. All of that has changed a lot with the cloud, and so it's very important to look at it more holistically and see what it means to the business and the users. So change management is a major aspect of educating users on looking at it differently. What they've been used to doing in the past might not be the right way. Mobile technologies is a major differentiator. So how do you show them that this is what is the future? This is what everybody wants. Your customers want this. Your newer employees, I don't know whether we call them Generation X, Generation Y, whatever. So how do they look at employment and what they want in their systems? One of the CHROs, his only goal of moving to the cloud was he wanted to attract top talent from Generation X or Generation Y or millennials onwards. So he wanted his entire project to be around that. So that's a different change management thing, thinking differently, not just from a system level, but also from the end user perspective. Who are you addressing, and why are you doing this change, and what do we do to make that happen? People who are recruiters and HR people might not get the, what it means to have a system for your future employee. So discussing that and thinking through that is different in the cloud. So I'm sorry, are we running out of time? Or?
Yeah, but we are good though. So thank you for that. Final question before we open up for, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gopal. This is Ram.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ashish and Gopal. And I understand you should be actually, you might support many clients to, on your journey to cloud. And I have only 2 questions to ask here. And how do you determine whether the client should go to the SaaS or the PaaS or IaaS solution? What is the basis for that? The second question is, all of us should be in the room, the one way or other should be looking at the moving to the cloud. What is the most painful thing you might have seen in your journey? You might have done many. Yeah, definitely there should be something, one you might have kicked off with. And then what is the best thing that you see out of the cloud? Can you share?
Great questions. We'll give brief answer because we want to do the raffle. That's really important.
Sure.
So the first one, very importantly to your point, it's really about a consultative decision making, right? I mentioned about the fact that old decision models no longer work. So we can talk about that also after this because there are so many new factors. As I mentioned, you have so many choices. At the same time, you're looking at critical capabilities going into the future, right? So really it's about the points we spoke about. If you bring those into your decision making, if it's a more difficult scenario, we can talk about it. So that's point number 1.
So sorry, Ashish, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Sorry, that question alone is the biggest question that we get from every on-prem customer trying to look to go to the cloud. How do we understand whether cloud's the right fit for us? What do we do and how do we do it? So we've developed a solution, a transformational assessment that touches upon these 5 areas, assesses that with the lowest person in the pool, and bring them together in a collaborative fashion to discuss all the 5 elements that we have. I don't want to use this forum to talk about that. I'd be happy to share that knowledge with you. It's an assessment. It's a pre-planned solution that we can guide through your decision-making process. The decision will come from your team that this is a right fit or not in there, and that's the start of the momentum that I was talking about. And your second question about biggest pain points that you have, losing control of certain aspects of the system is the biggest pain point that customers and us had in the last 100, 200 plus implementations. On-prem applications, you have all control. In the cloud, you don't. But the biggest success is exceptional, exciting technologies and solutions, and taking your focus away from my servers and operating system upgrades and database upgrades and application upgrades and all of that stuff, and putting it into how can I change my business with business process changes and that kind of stuff. Why should organizations focus on stuff that doesn't matter to them? They should be focusing on stuff that matters to them, which is RPA, IoT, all of the newer technologies post go live, and that's the most exciting part. Most customers get that excitement. That's from the cloud transformation.
So further discussion we can have, in Moscone West level 1. Just stop by. We'll chat through that.